Hey guys, it's Alex the RealMrRobinson here. Welcome back to my chronological recap of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this is part 10, and we are talking about one of my absolute favorites of the series, Captain America the Winter Soldier. So if you remember in the last video, I mentioned that Thor the Dark World wasn't a terrible movie or wasn't even bad, but it was just so bland and average that I was starting to give up on the series. And even before The Winter Soldier came out and I saw the trailers, I thought, you know what, this could be really good, but after Thor the Dark World, I'm just not overly excited. And then I saw the movie and ended up being beyond excited for everything that the MCU had to offer in the future. But anyway, this is the first film in the MCU directed by Joe and Anthony Russo, who would later do Civil War and would finish off the entire Infinity Saga with Infinity War and Endgame. Less than a month away! But this was a hell of a sequel. This is one of the greatest sequels ever made. Because I love the first Avenger, but even then, with my love for that movie, it pales in comparison to The Winter Soldier. And what it does more than anything is really show the entire world how cool Steve Rogers' Captain America is. With Iron Man 2 and Thor the Dark World, both of those were movies that kind of felt like an average sequel that just kind of did elements from the first movie over again. Thor the Dark World was a little more different than the first Thor, but Iron Man 2 definitely had that feeling. Because Captain America the Winter Soldier takes place after the Avengers and in modern times, you can't really do that. And that works to the film's advantage. Not only that, it's a completely different genre compared to the first one. Where the first Avenger was a World War II war film with some fantastical elements to it. It was very much a war film. This is a spy thriller, and I think it ranks up there with some of the best James Bond stuff, some of the best of the Bourne series. It is that good of a movie. And now that the Avengers are all done with, and this is the first solo Captain America movie in modern times, we get to see Steve Rogers and how he works within this environment. And it's not in the vein of, haha, Steve Rogers is not familiar with modern technology or these new things. It's more like the world's changed, and the government and America that he used to believe in and that he fought for in World War II has changed as well. But he's not really on board with it because he does not see it as the right thing. When Nick Fury shows him S.H.I.E.L.D's response to the Battle of New York, Project Insight, he's not really on board with it because it's pretty much 3 helicarriers that are staying in the air forever and are constantly spying on not just everyone in America, but everybody around the world as well. And for Steve Rogers, that doesn't resemble freedom at all. That represents fear, and everyone's basically willing to give up their freedom to have security, so S.H.I.E.L.D. could pretty much take out a terrorist before they even step out of their cave. And what I really admire about Steve Rogers is his willingness to not back down. When Nick Fury tells him that this is the world that we live in now, S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is and not as we'd like it to be, and you have to get with the program, Cap just says, don't hold your breath, and that's something I admire. When I did the first Avenger, and I mentioned that I relate to Peter Parker more, but Steve Rogers is the character that I aspire to be more like, this is the perfect example. Standing up for what you believe is right, even if society is completely different on what your view is, you shouldn't back down. And it very much plays into what's going on in today's society, where our country and even the entire world is not what we thought it once was. It's a little darker, and everyone's very much living in fear rather than with optimism and hope. And Steve Rogers in this movie really represents the America that we all want it to be. Let's talk about the supporting cast. In this movie, Scarlett Johansson is back as Natasha Romanoff, and so is the entirety of S.H.I.E.L.D., because Cap is now living in modern times and the Avengers have gone their separate ways, doing their own things. He has nowhere to really go but S.H.I.E.L.D. So unlike in Iron Man 2, Natasha and S.H.I.E.L.D. play a vital role, and this is the movie where Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, is perfected. I mentioned in Iron Man 2 she didn't really have much to do. In the first Avengers movie, we got to see a little bit more of her. This is the movie where she officially becomes one of the MCU's best characters. And what makes this character work is due to one particular twist that pretty much affects the entire MCU going forward. In the Avengers, we were told that Natasha Romanoff was pretty much a bad seed, and she even used to be a Russian spy working for the KGB. But when Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, was ordered to kill her, he made a different call, and he was the reason that Natasha joined S.H.I.E.L.D. because she wanted to go down the right path. And because of the big twist that happens where S.H.I.E.L.D. is compromised, everything that she thought she was fighting for ended up being a complete lie. So she ends up being in the very same position that Steve Rogers is, where she wants to fight for the right thing. So she's great, and there's a lot of character development with her. Another great addition to this movie is Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. And when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I just assumed that Falcon was going to be another S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, because that's where Black Widow came from, that's where Hawkeye came from, so why not? But he's not a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, he's just a pararescuer who's retired from the military, and it actually works that he's not a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, because with S.H.I.E.L.D. being compromised, Steve and Natasha can't really trust anybody, and Sam Wilson is the only guy that Steve Rogers could trust to help them with this entire operation and stop the S.H.I.E.L.D.'s corruption at its core and Project Insight overall. And when both Rogers and Wilson meet for the first time, the dialogue is very natural, and I just love their introduction, how Sam Wilson's just going out for an early morning jog, and then Steve Rogers is just running circles around him, literally, because Steve Rogers is just so much faster. Every time he passes Sam Wilson, he's like, on your left, and the two of them really bond. So it's a great dynamic, and while Sam Wilson is very much a supporting character, he still has a great personality, and his action scenes are just awesome. I'll get back to the action scenes a little later, because wow, are they awesome. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is back in this movie, and this is the movie where we really get to know a lot more about him. And let me just say this, since I'm doing this series in chronological order, when Nick Fury says, "Last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye," I admittedly chuckled, because now that we know the official backstory of what happened, it's kind of goofy, and people have said that Goose scratching out Nick Fury's eye in Captain Marvel just ruined the character, but having just rewatched Winter Soldier, I'm like, no, not at all. Nick Fury is still a badass in this movie, and Samuel L. Jackson absolutely delivers. And plus, that was a much younger Nick Fury we were talking about. He was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. He wasn't as cynical as he is now. But now is the movie where we really get to see how Nick Fury is as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. So we know that he's very cynical. There are only a few people that he actually trusts. And he actually gets to partake in a really badass action scene that's solely dedicated to him. It's this very intense car chase. And considering in Thor: The Dark World, where all the action scenes made me go, okay, that's cool, all the action scenes in this movie put me on the edge of my seat. They were intense. The car chase with Nick Fury is so intense and just so well done. There's a giant street battle that involves Steve, Natasha, and Sam versus the Winter Soldier, but the best action scene in the movie is the elevator fight. For my money, it's not the best action scene in the entire MCU, but in terms of all the solo movies, this right here is the best action scene in the entire franchise. And what I really love about it is that it plays into how strong and smart Steve Rogers is when it comes to combat. I mentioned that while Steve Rogers might not always be the biggest guy in a fight, he is the smartest and could take anybody down because of how smart he is when it comes to fighting. And I love how the elevator fight's set up. He is in the elevator at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, and then we get a couple members from Strike, which is pretty much S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Black Ops team, come into the elevator. Steve Rogers notices that one of the guys is holding his taser very tightly. Then the elevator stops. More guys come in. Steve Rogers notices a little bit of sweat coming from one guy, and then the elevator stops again. More Strike members come in, and it's gotten to a point where everyone's formed a circle around Steve Rogers. So at this point, he knows what's up. He knows something is going to go down. Asses are going to be kicked, and it's not going to be his. And I love how he initiates the fight. Just in a very calm manner, he says, "Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?" And he just looks at the one Strike member in front of him, and then all hell breaks loose. One of the Strike members grabs his shield. They put a magnetic handcuff onto one of his hands so they can just tie him to the back of the elevator, but he manages to break a guy's kneecap, knock some other guys out, throw him against the wall, throw him up against the camera. He breaks some bones, and the sound editing in this movie is awesome. Whenever I hear a bone break in this movie, I'm just like, oh! And he manages to take out an entire squad of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in a tiny, confined space without his shield. And if that's not proof that Steve Rogers is the best when it comes to hand-to-hand combat in the MCU, then I don't know what is. Now let's actually get into the villains and more of the big twist of the movie. So the big twist of the movie is that Hydra has been inside S.H.I.E.L.D. ever since its inception. After the Red Skull was killed, S.H.I.E.L.D. recruited German scientists, including Arnim Zola, once again played by Toby Jones. And while Toby Jones was working at S.H.I.E.L.D., he found a way to pretty much create a new Hydra within S.H.I.E.L.D. And Project Insight is just one of their things, where they want to take out anybody who could possibly be a threat to Hydra either now or in the future, because they can predict what the future holds. And it's also revealed that throughout history, Hydra's been influencing wars, and when something doesn't go quite their way, they send in the Winter Soldier to change things and set history on the course that they want it to be set on. And that whole scene where Zola breaks it down is almost horrifying to watch. And it puts Natasha Romanoff into a bad position because the organization that she joined to do good has now become the very thing she wanted to escape from. And Steve gets screwed over because the one organization that he joined, that he had after he got frozen from the ice, can no longer be trusted, and it's run by the very organization that spawned from the Nazi Party that he fought during World War II. So in that act, he pretty much died for nothing. But given that this is Steve Rogers, he's not going to let that bother him. He still has a strong moral compass. He will still fight Hydra, take it down for good. And even though it might seem like he's outnumbered, he has allies by his side and will not give up. Now, who's actually Hydra? Well, we have Robert Redford, who plays Alexander Pierce, who was Nick Fury's boss, still is, even while Fury is director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And Robert Redford is a great villain. He's not a super memorable one, but he has the charisma. His plan for Project Insight and what Hydra wants, as he presents it to the World Security Council, makes some sort of sense. In a way, he's one of the two villains that would be a prototype to Thanos. The other I'll get to in a couple of videos. But what he presents to the World Security Council is that Project Insight could take out terrorists before the terrorist act even commences. And the way he presents it to the World Security Council, you're kind of on board with it, but then you have to think, no, you're the leader of an organization that spawned from the Nazi Party. You have your own agendas that are not peaceful. You're just doing all this to make sure nobody stands in Hydra's way. But Robert Redford does a great job. Then we have Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier. Now, because I'm a big movie guy and do a whole lot of research, I kind of knew that when it said Sebastian Stan would be playing the Winter Soldier, I knew it was Bucky Barnes because it's the same actor. So it wasn't really a huge big twist when it was revealed that the Winter Soldier was Bucky. But look at it from the characters when you're living within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We knew that the Winter Soldier was Bucky, but Steve didn't. To him, he is shocked and almost defeated by the fact that his best friend from back in the day has been brainwashed and turned into a Hydra weapon. And while Steve Rogers was taken back at first, he's not willing to give up on his friend. Even though he is a Hydra weapon, he still believes that the real Bucky Barnes is in there somewhere and he wants to redeem him. And the action scenes between these two is very intense. The big final battle is well choreographed between these two characters, but it's that freeway fight before Steve finds out that the Winter Soldier is Bucky. The hand-to-hand combat is so well done, especially the moment when Steve has to fight without his shield and the Winter Soldier has a knife out. The exchanges that these two guys have are just like, oh man, it almost comes close to being as well choreographed and as intense as the elevator fight. It's that good. I think this is a damn near perfect movie. It's got phenomenal action scenes, great characters, real drama, even though it still maintains a lot of the MCU humor, a big twist that changed the entire franchise forever. The score by Henry Jackman, I think, is very underappreciated. It's great, and the Winter Soldier theme is very eerie, ominous, and foreboding. It reminds me very much of the Joker's theme from The Dark Knight, where when you hear it, you know something's gonna happen, it's not gonna be good, and you know the Winter Soldier is not far behind. It is a haunting theme. I honestly can't decide which of those themes I like better, the Joker's theme or the Winter Soldier's theme, because both of them served their purpose incredibly well. If I had any criticisms for this movie, and they're more nitpicks, it's that I wish there was more Sharon Carter. Emily VanCamp is in this movie, who plays Peggy's niece, Sharon, who is also an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And back when the Avengers came out, I was on a big comic book reading frenzy, particularly with Marvel Comics. I read Iron Man Extremis, I read the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline where Peter Parker is killed and we get introduced to Miles Morales, I read Winter Soldier, I read Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men, and I read a little bit of Infinity Gauntlet. And with this movie, I was very disappointed that Sharon didn't get a whole lot to do. But I've learned to accept that comic book movies are never direct adaptations from whichever stories they're pulling from. And plus, that gives us more time to develop Natasha Romanoff, so I'm not completely disappointed. Plus, Sharon would play a little more of an important role in Civil War. And then the other nitpick I have is that there's a scene where Alexander Pierce is talking to the Winter Soldier, and then Pierce's maid walks in, and because she saw the Winter Soldier, Alexander Pierce has to kill her. And I'm like, that was unnecessary. It was an attempt to try to make him a little too evil when we kind of got the point. I would have cut that scene out. But that's just me, and outside of that, I adore this movie. It's just everything I love when it comes to an action movie, a comic book movie, a character movie. It's got everything. So even if you've seen it or not, get off your ass and go see it right now. It is one of the best of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's in my top 40 of favorite movies of all time. I absolutely adore The Winter Soldier. Now let's talk about the cameos. And I said cameos. Obviously, the Stan Lee one is in here, and Stan Lee's playing a security guard at the Smithsonian who's wandering around the Captain America exhibit that has a bunch of old costumes on display, and Steve Rogers pretty much steals the old uniform that he had in the first Avenger, because his stealth uniform that he wears at S.H.I.E.L.D. has a tracker, and he obviously can't wear that, which, by the way, that suit is badass, and is infinitely better than the one in the Avengers, which I didn't hate, but I look at that suit and go, wow, shouldn't you be off shooting some high school PSAs? Because that just does not look as good as it should. But anyway, Steve steals the old World War II suit. Stan, the security guard, notices it and goes, "Oh man, I am so fired." There's not much to that. It's amusing. The other cameo I wanted to point out is Danny Pudi, who I know best as Abed from Community. Joe and Anthony Russo actually worked on the first couple seasons of Community with Dan Harmon, and some of my favorite episodes from them are the paintball episodes from, I want to say season 3, but they were really fantastic episodes. And Abed's my favorite character in Community, so with me, I like to imagine that Community takes place in the same world as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I just want to wonder, is Abed a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, or is he Hydra? I should probably tweet that to the Russo brothers and see if they respond, but yeah, it's just cool to see Danny Pudi in this very small role, and he plays it as if he's Abed. And again, Abed's my favorite character in that show, so I'm not complaining. Now, as for the two mid-credit scenes, there is another S.H.I.E.L.D. base that is actually Hydra, run by Baron von Strucker, and it's revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been in possession of Loki's scepter ever since the events of the first Avengers, but now it's fallen under the hands of Hydra, and Strucker explains to his assistant that now that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s gone, the Avengers are going to have to reassemble to take out any remaining Hydra threats, and that this particular Hydra cell has been experimenting with the scepter to create new advanced weapons, and they've been doing human manipulation with two volunteers, Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, who would eventually become Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. So it's just a little preview for Age of Ultron and these two new characters. It's fun. The end credit scene is not really worth it, like most of the second end credit scenes in the MCU. Basically, it's Bucky going into the Smithsonian, reading about his entire biography and trying to learn where he came from and what his actual background was, since he's starting to regain his memories as Bucky Barnes. But there you go, that's my recap for Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Now we're going to take a break from all the Earthbound stuff and head to the cosmos with the movie that put the universe in Marvel Cinematic Universe, Guardians of the Galaxy. I really cannot wait to talk about this movie again, and it really makes me happy that I can revisit the Guardians of the Galaxy movies knowing that James Gunn is back as director of Volume 3. Now I want to hear what you guys have to say about Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Is it one of your favorites in the MCU as well, or is it actually kind of lower? Let me know, and until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.